Today on Locked On Rockies, would you rather take the Rockies approach or the Orioles approach? An interesting look at the two teams and comments from Baltimore's owner that I absolutely hate.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 25th day of August in the year 2023. I'm your host and Rockies fan extraordinaire, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. If your team is the Colorado Rockies, well, guess what? You're in the right spot because that's what we do around here is talk about the Colorado Rockies each and every single day. You can find us on your favorite streaming service. You can also find us on SiriusXM and the SiriusXM app, where you can also find your Colorado Rockies play-by-play coverage. And you can find us on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can let us know your thoughts about the Rockies in the comments and fire off your hot takes. Today on the show, going to talk Orioles, going to talk two different approaches, going to talk rebuilds and winning percentages in between playoff appearances for the Colorado Rockies. Also want to talk about the Baltimore Orioles owner's comments about his club and how disappointing they were to hear. And we'll also take a good look and a brief look at today's ball game and the upcoming series against the Orioles. Hopefully going to try and get a crossover scheduled here. So, because I think the Orioles are a really fascinating team to look at as a Rockies fan, because the Orioles have actually done rebuild stuff, whereas the Rockies have avoided it, and the Orioles have been able to, have overall been underwhelming and oftentimes flat out bad. The Rockies can't really say any different, but this is the team that has now built something that seems to be special, but it might not last very long, according to the owner. Before we dive into everything today, just want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper picks, and you can win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. I wanted to look at some winning percentages. I wanted to look at the approaches from these two teams, and I wanted to look at the gaps in between playoff appearances for these teams. And mind you, the Orioles have a longer history than the Rockies, so we can look at it more in since 94. Will basically be the benchmark here for this comparison I want to make. And I want to start by saying since 1994, we'll go actually 93. I'm sorry. We got to get the inaugural seasons in 93. I always mismatch that. The Orioles have been to the postseason 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in that span since 93. The Rockies have also been to the playoffs 5 times in that stretch and since their inception. The Rockies have gone further than the Orioles have in the postseason with the magical 07 run in 93. But on average, the Orioles have performed much better as playoff teams with a winning percentage of .444 and a winning percentage of .500 in 96 and 97, a winning percentage of .500 in 2012. And in 2014, the winning percentage of .429. Last appearance was 2016 for the O's, and that was a wild card game where they lost. The Rockies only have a winning record above .500 in one season. They only have the one winning record in the playoffs, and they only have 2 playoff wins in their last 7 games. And overall, I mean, the World Series run is the obvious outlier for the Rockies. And so I was looking at those numbers, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. Playoffs, that's part of the equation. But I was curious how much the gap in between, how bad the teams were in between, and how long it took for, say, the Orioles to get back into the playoffs since 93. And it was a long stretch for them here from 93 after making the playoffs in 97. The team did not see the playoffs until 2012 again, and never was above 500 during that stretch. And then after 2012, they made the playoffs again in 2014, but did play above 500 ball and have played above 500 ball in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seasons since 2012. The Rockies haven't done that. In fact, the Rockies don't even, as in their entire existence, the highest winning percentage in Rockies history, according to backtobaseball.com, is the 2009, 92, and 70 win team for the Rockies. That's a .568 winning percentage. This current season for the Orioles is a higher winning percentage right now. That could obviously is subject to change. The Orioles had a higher winning percentage in 2014, in 2012, and let's see, they also had a higher winning percentage than that in 97, and just a little under in 94. So my point is, and what I'm saying is, I think there's more. The Baltimore Orioles, while going through long stretches of bad baseball, have also been able to figured out ways to be more successful more frequently than the Rockies have been able to in their first 30 years of existence. Granted, there are times where the Rockies and Orioles are on different sides, but especially now, you have to start looking at a team like Baltimore, if you're Colorado, and see what works. This is a team that had a high winning percentage from the span of 2012 to 2016, made the playoffs in 3 of 5 years, and on those other seasons, they played at least 500 ball. Then they decided to blow it up, and now they're setting up a future where they have back-to-back over 500 seasons, and they're looking at potentially winning their division. So it's a frustrating experience to be an Orioles fan, and overall, it hasn't panned out a lot, but we're talking from the context of Rockies fans. Would you feel more comfortable going through more seasons and stuff like this? Do you feel more comfortable with the Rockies embracing a blow it up, let the kids play type of season, when you see that when teams like the Orioles have done it, they've been able to build a solid window, at least for a little bit? Well, they're going to see if they can do it again here, because when you look at the Orioles were pitiful in 2018, were pitiful in 2018 through 2021, but now it's built a roster with 4 All-Stars on it this year. It's built a roster of young players that are going up against one of the best divisions in baseball and leading it down the stretch, and are 1 win away from at least 80 wins right now, with an opportunity to crank that even higher and get it into the 90s. And this is an Orioles team that, when you look, especially in the prism of the history with the Rockies, has just done more winning. It's a frustrating roller coaster you got to ride, but at least the Orioles have embraced and honored and shown and said that what they were doing was a rebuild, instead of the Rockies' consistent run, instead of what we've seen from the Rockies in the past. Doesn't it make this season a little bit easier to swallow, seeing the moves that they made, seeing the fact that they're turning to young guys and taking in the context of everything? It does for me. It makes it at least a little bit more interesting. Doesn't make the losses any more fun to watch or any more fun to experience. But at least it's shown that the Rockies are looking to rebuild and retool in hopes of getting back there, like other teams traditionally have. And when you look at a team like Baltimore, it has panned out more often than not, at least compared to the Rockies. More postseason, or even though they have the same amount of postseason appearances, the Orioles have done better in the postseason than the Rockies, and have done better in seasons overall in terms of winning. higher win percentages. I mean, obviously, I think the winning percentage probably gets a little skewed with how bad with how bad the Orioles have been. But when you factor in this season, when you factor in a couple of the other bad seasons for the Rockies, I mean, the lowest winning percentage right here that I see in the span that we're in the prism we're talking about for the Orioles was 2021, where they had a 321 winning percentage. The Rockies have never had something that low, but they've been, this year they're at a 378. Last year, a 414. 2020, even in the pandemic year, 433. 2019, 438, 420, 407 in 2015 and 2014. Another one in the threes in 2012. When you look at the Rockies' winning percentage overall since 2012, in that, like we mentioned, the same time period where the Orioles made 3 postseason appearances over the next 5 seasons, the Rockies' winning percentage is abysmal outside of of 18 and 17, and even at that point, the Rockies weren't that far ahead of being 500. So it's something you don't necessarily want to do, and is certainly something the Rockies never want to embrace. And it has its complications, and it's deeper than just wins and losses, and it takes how you're developing your players, what your philosophy towards development is, and a million other things. But when you break it down and when you look at the way that the Orioles have been able to have success in different ways than the Rockies and open up better windows in different stretches by being willing to embrace a rebuild, and then take the Rockies' willingness to spend a little bit more money from here and there, that seems like a recipe for development success for the Rockies. Is if you can be willing to make the moves from the pieces you're willing to spend money on, your veteran players, and blow it up like you have been this year, there's a good chance you can help build yourself good, solid 5-year windows. And for a team like the Rockies, that's kind of what you want. That's what you'll take, especially if if you can make the windows and stretches of bad baseball shorter, because that's what the Orioles are trying to do in this rebuild of theirs. 2017 was when the first season they finished above or below 500 since 2011. They went on a 6-year stretch of playing at least 5-year ball. That then made a 5-year stretch, a 5-year stretch of ball of under 500 ball, but now that's led to 2 seasons of above 500. So it's only 1 season shorter, sure, but if that can get shorter and shorter, or if you only have to go through 2 crappy years, it's a lot better than 6, 7, or depending on how you look at the Rockies stretch right now of 5 seasons. At least that's the Rockies. If they were on the same track as the Orioles, basically, we'd be looking at opening up the window, and hopefully we are, by doing what the Rockies did this trade deadline and being willing to do that again if necessary next year to keep building for the future. So hope that made sense. A lot of numbers, but just basically the gist of it is, while it takes time, the Orioles have been able to rebuild successfully and look like they've done it again. If their owner doesn't want to pinch his pennies too much and not hang on to some of these players and develop without charging the fans more for the experience. We'll talk about that coming up here in segment number 2. But before we do that, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, and that is Sleeper. Hey, if you want to get a boost on your sleeper picks, you got to check our promo code Locked On. And this is for those out there that like playing daily fantasy. Those players out there that your stuff. You're feeling confident. You notice the trends. You follow the Rockies. You want to pick Elias Diaz getting over a hit and a half, or getting 2 hits. You want to pick someone hitting a home run. Well, guess what? If you think your favorite Rockies player can hit a home run tonight against the Orioles, you can swing for the fences on Sleeper with up to 100 times payout. All you have to do is choose 2 or more players that you like and select more or less on their stat categories like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. On the YouTube, you can see what a little slip looks like there on the Sleeper app. But if you use our promo code locked on, you're going to get an $100 match on your first deposit. That's right. $100 match on your first deposit when you go test your baseball knowledge with Sleeper and the Sleeper app. Use promo code locked on and you'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast for free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. You can also find us on the Sirius XM and the Sirius XM app, as well as the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. We were talking about approaches and building contention windows and seeing if how the Rockies have handled things versus how the Orioles have handled things could be beneficial, or which one would you prefer for the Rockies? Because, I don't know. I just would always prefer there be some sort of a direction instead of the amount of directionless seasons it feels like the Rockies have had in their tenure. I wanted to dive into the comments from the owner of the Baltimore Orioles and his comments on raising prices and keeping his players. And this is from Sam Connon on Fan Nation, but he's quoting from a New York Times article and writing about a New York Times article here, and I wanted to read a bit of this and then dive into it as why I hate hearing about this and why I just don't understand what happened. Or why now? I think is really the best thing to say is why now? Why say it here? Is it to just take it on the chin ahead of a postseason run and the excitement of that, and you can kind of just, you were up front and then the price increase that was probably going to happen anyway due to playoff, being a better and being a playoff team, that was going to happen anyway. I'm just curious why now, especially when the Orioles don't really have, while we talked about there being success in the prism and in the scope comparing it to the Rockies, overall the Orioles have been mostly forgettable and bad for a while. So to spoil the momentum and the fun, and it's not completely spoiled, obviously, there's plenty of baseball left. The Orioles fans probably, ain't the first time they're going to be disappointed in the owner. It certainly won't be the last. And so I'm just curious why he had to open up that way or why he had to say that now. And I'm reading here from Sam Connon on SI.com here. The 77-47 Orioles, I believe that might be a little outdated. Let me just double check that. Yeah. The 79-48 Orioles here from this article from a couple of days ago, who are on pace to secure just their second AL East crown in the last 26 years. Remember, the Rockies have never won the NL West. Have a roster chock full of young talent. Catcher Adley Rutschman has anchored the lineup since arriving midway through 2022. Shortstop Gunnar Henderson is one of the favorites to win AL Rookie of the Year. And the outfield trio of Austin Hayes, Cedric Mullins, and Anthony Santander has already reached its all-star potential. Closer Felix Bautista has broken out as one of the top relievers in baseball, while Kyle Bradish and Grayson Rodriguez have been pegged as building blocks in the rotation. According to the owner of the Angels, John Angelos here's what he had to say about it might be difficult to extend all of them beyond their current deal. Let's say we sat down and showed you the financials for the Orioles, Angelos said in the interview. You will quickly see that when people talk about giving this player $200 million, that player $150 million, we would be so financially underwater that you'd have to raise the prices massively. Now, are people going to come and pay that? I don't know if we're at the limit, to your point. I don't know if we're in equilibrium elasticity, supply and demand. Maybe we are, but really that's just one team. What I'm really trying to think about is macro. And why? Like, why? I mean, and again, if you're not in the business to be able to pay your players, like, you shouldn't own the teams. Like, these are some of the wealthiest people in the country, in the world. And the Orioles being good is exciting and fun on the East Coast with a market that cares. People care about Baltimore sports. They're over there. I mean, it matters. And to build all this talent, to go through all the crap that you had to get here, finally build something, and then poo-poo it like that is disappointing. But, reality check. It's the major leagues. It's free agency. It's injuries. It's regression. There's a million other factors that could hit the team. Certainly. But to sit there and say that you can't build a payroll to help this team without drastically raising the price on the consumer, I don't believe you. Then that means that the Orioles themselves are not good at generating money and generating revenue. And I find that hard to believe when our friends at Locked On Orioles says this. Here's what the Orioles and John Angelos, whatever his name is, get this year. Revenue sharing, $110 million. National TV deal, $60 million. BAMTech payout, $30 million. Masson deal, $40 million. Game day sales, $80 million. And they're guesstimating in some ways with some of those as well. And that's $320 million this year that they're bringing in. And they follow it up and saying, this is not perfect accounting, and some of this money overlaps in other categories, but even a super lowball estimate is like $250 million they're bringing in. And this year, they're running a $65 million payroll. That just is ridiculous. It just simply isn't, it just does not. That's just another example of ownership of wealthy people crying poor when they don't have to. That's ludicrous, especially when you've owners manipulate playing time when really the true value of players isn't always reached. I just don't understand when the plan works. When the rebuild works, when the Orioles have now set themselves up for success, the owners can't get out of them the way and see a benefit of investing in the team and spending that money and bringing in the revenue of the playoffs, of increased exposure, of having a team of 4 all-stars at least in a young core. I mean, sure, there's more business. It's baseball, it's money, it's shareholders, it's profits, it's all of this. Yeah, I know. But it's also the ultra wealthy. When you're talking about ownership of sports teams, you are talking about a high amount of wealth and influence and power. Maybe not always at the national scale, but it can certainly be local. Look at Dick Monfort. Look at the Monfort's moves. Look at the Monfort's influences in Denver. Look at that. Because it's a cop-out. And it's, woe is me. We're going to have to raise the prices on you. Sorry, just going to have to do it. Because we're generating all this money and we're only wanting to pay $65 million. And so when these actual good players that we develop and wanted to have on our team and can lead to success and lead to exposure and lead to increased revenue and lead to increased season ticket sales, XYZ, I can't do it. Can't figure out a way. Where am I going to get the money? Where am I going to figure out that? You own a sports team. You figured out how to get that money. And sports are not... They might not be as profitable as some might say, but they are still a lucrative business. So it's so disappointing when the people that call the shots, when the people that pay the money, when the people that have the access to that money and are in those positions are so quick to punt. Doesn't his comments feel like it just kind of takes the air out of everything and adds an increased pressure to you as players perhaps? Or especially the pressure you feel for, as a fan in terms of whatever real pressure. I know it's not the same, but it just makes the window smaller. It makes the criticism going to be louder, especially when they're saying, well, if these guys don't get the job done, How long are we going to be able to stick with them after their rookie deals? How long? What happens when we start going into arbitration? What happens when we start dealing with all this stuff? It doesn't really build a lot of confidence in you as an Orioles fan when your owner says stuff like that. It's just like the same way where when you hear Dick Monfort, when he's talked about the Denver market and other excuses for money in the past, and it's just like, but dude, you know, with the Rockies being the big, way different than the Orioles in this, it's like, dang, the Rockies are paying Chris Bryant almost as much as the entire Orioles payroll. You're telling me the Orioles, the owner of the Orioles can't flex a little bit more like Dick Monfort? That's just not true. I don't buy it. I just think that this is so disappointing and just such a way of woe is me for I gotta spend my money on my baseball team. Oh, I have all this. But it's my money. What I earn it. I don't know. But it's like, then why, if you're not in the business in a baseball to like spend money to build a competitive team and keep a team competitive and win championships, then what are you doing? What are you doing? That's the whole point of what it's supposed to be, on top of all the other added benefits that you probably get from owning a sports team. Just takes the wind out of the sails, and I think takes a little bit of the hype away from the Orioles. Not the players, but it's kind of like with the Rockies, where it's just like, when you get exposed to some of that stuff from on the business side, you just kind of have a bad taste in your mouth a little bit. And I hope that he backtracks, and I hope that that's not the case, and I hope he finds the money in his heart to keep a good baseball team together and build to make it better. But we'll see. All right, Rockies Orioles tonight. Let's talk about that coming up in segment number 3. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast, for free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And this is a big moment for the Orioles here, as they want to put some ground in between them and Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay just beat up on the Rockies. The Orioles not too happy about that. We were talking about our friends from Locked On Orioles earlier, and they had some fun things to say about the Rockies when watching this game, as called the Colorado Rockies have once again decided to be an unserious franchise. If you didn't see how they just blew it in the 9th against the Rays, don't look. It's uglier than you think. We won't read the comments because, and then they followed this one with, whoever assembled the Rockies bullpen should be in jail. I had zero expectation of the Rockies taking even a game from the Rays in this series. Then they were either tied or had the lead in the 8th in all 3 games. So there you go. That's some fun words from the Orioles, who are keeping ties on the Rockies. So Locked On Orioles is certainly going to know what they're coming into and expecting from this ball club. But Kyle Freeland's on the bump. He needs it would be good for him to get a win, a nice clean ball game for him. He's going up against Cole Irvin tonight. The Rockies are 2-3 in Kyle's last starts. They did win the last time Kyle was out there against the White Sox. He did give up 4 earned runs while striking out 6 and giving up 8 hits. No long balls in that one, because that's been the curse of Kyle Freeland, of course, for most of his career, and this year especially. Before that game against the White Sox, he had given up at least 1 home run in his last 3 starts. This is, again, an Orioles team looking to get win number 80 tonight. Rockies going up against Cole Irvin, who has got a 1-3 record, a 4.66 ERA, a whip of 1.38 in 58 innings pitched. He struck out 53 and walked 19, giving up 7 home runs there as well. So Rockies, going to see a guy that they that hasn't been pitching all year, that's been able to get lit up a little bit. But again, this is a team that is certainly foaming at the mouth to take down the Rockies, and it's the road Rockies. But if the Rockies are able to jump out ahead and do what they did against Tampa Bay, and hope that their bullpen is a little bit tighter, they might be able to steal a win or two here, like they could have against the Rays. But They're going to have to play perfect and clean baseball, and they're going to have to get out of the 8th inning, and they're going to have to be able to turn to that bullpen. Not a lot of people have seen Irvin in the Rockies lineup. Charlie Blackmon does have a couple of hits off of him in an RBI. Elias Diaz, Ryan McMahon, and Brendan Rodgers all 0 for 3. McMahon with 2 strikeouts against Irvin, and Alan Trejo is 1 for 1. So there you go. Let's wrap things up for today. Just brief little game preview there because we ran a little bit long on the other segments, but thanks so much for tuning in for more Rockies coverage right here on the Locked On Rockies podcast. Find us free and streaming on your favorite streaming service. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. You can check us out on YouTube. You can check us out on the SiriusXM app. And until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.